Kieran Alden thought he had mastered the art of deception, but Celeste Alden had mastered something far more dangerous: patience. When she found the smear of lipstick on his shirt, she didn't scream, didn't confront him in a fit of rage. She simply smiled, knowing that his downfall had already begun. Celeste Drayton had spent years believing she had the perfect marriage. She and her husband, Kieran Vaughn, had built a life together that others admired. Their love story seemed unbreakable, a relationship that had withstood the test of time. Kieran was a successful real estate developer, well respected in his field, and a man who never failed to provide for their home. Celeste, 6 months pregnant with their first child, had never felt more content. She spent her days preparing for their baby's arrival, carefully decorating the nursery and planning for the future. Every detail of their life seemed to be falling into place. That evening, Celeste was in the laundry room, humming softly as she sorted through Kieran's clothes. It was a small routine she had done for years, something she never thought twice about. She lifted one of his white dress shirts from the pile, ready to toss it into the wash, when something unusual caught her eye. A stain. She brought the fabric closer, her brow furrowing as she examined the mark on the collar. It was a deep red smudge. Lipstick. Her breath hitched in her throat as she stared at it, her mind racing. She didn't wear lipstick often, and when she did, it was always a neutral shade. This color was bold, a striking red she had never owned. Slowly, she raised the shirt to her nose. A faint scent of perfume lingered on the fabric, floral and unfamiliar. Her hands trembled as she tightened her grip on the shirt. A cold feeling crept into her chest, replacing the warmth she had felt just moments ago. At first, she tried to reason with herself. Maybe it was a mistake. Maybe the stain had come from an accidental brush against someone at work. But deep down, she knew better. Kieran was meticulous with his appearance. He was careful with his clothes, always making sure they were spotless. There was no logical reason for that stain to be there. She sat down, staring at the evidence in her hands. The reality of the situation settled in slowly, suffocating her. Had she been blind all this time? Had there been signs she had ignored? She thought back to the past few weeks. Kieran had been coming home later than usual, brushing it off with excuses about work. His phone had become an extension of his hand, always face down when he placed it on the table. There had been moments when she had caught him looking at her differently, almost as if he were carrying a secret too heavy to reveal. The realization hit her like a tidal wave. She had trusted him completely, never once doubting his loyalty. But now, everything she believed about their marriage was unraveling before her. Her mind drifted to their unborn child, the life growing inside her. She had been creating a future for their family, making sacrifices and adjustments to ensure their happiness. And all this time, had Kieran been betraying her? Tears threatened to spill from her eyes, but she forced them back. She refused to break down. Not yet. Instead, she folded the shirt neatly, placing it back into the laundry basket as if nothing had happened. She took a deep breath, trying to steady her racing heart. She wouldn't confront him. Not now. There was no point in listening to excuses, no point in giving him a chance to manipulate the situation. She had always been the type to think things through, to act with purpose. And this time would be no different. Her decision was already made. Betrayal had no place in her life. If Kieran thought she would be the kind of woman to beg for answers, to cry and plead for his love, he was wrong. Without hesitation, Celeste reached for her phone and dialed the number of a divorce attorney. Celeste didn't hesitate. The moment she found the lipstick stain on Kieran's shirt, she knew there was only one course of action. There was no need for confrontation, no reason to listen to lies or half-hearted excuses. She refused to be the woman who sat around waiting for a confession that would never come. The betrayal was clear, and she had no patience for deceit. Her child deserved a home built on trust, not one tainted by infidelity. Without a second thought, she picked up her phone and scheduled a consultation with a divorce attorney. The next, Morning. She dressed carefully, keeping her emotions locked away behind a calm exterior. There was no anger, no visible distress, only quiet determination. She arrived at the law office on time, her hands resting protectively over her growing belly as she took a seat across from the attorney. She explained her situation with steady resolve, providing all the necessary details. There was no dramatic outburst, no tears, just facts. She wanted the divorce to be swift and absolute. No reconciliation, no second chances. The attorney, impressed by her composure, assured her that everything would be handled efficiently. Kieran had no idea what was coming. That night, he walked through the front door like nothing had changed, kissing Celeste on the cheek and asking about her day. She played along, masking her disgust, unwilling to give him any clue about what she had set in motion. He had made his choices, and now he would face the consequences. It didn't take long for the papers to be drawn up. Celeste ensured that she would get full custody of their unborn child, securing their financial future while leaving Kieran with little room to contest. She had seen enough stories of women being trapped in endless legal battles, manipulated into believing they owed their cheating husbands another chance. She refused to be one of them. When the day arrived, Kieran was blindsided. The moment he received the divorce papers, his entire world tilted. He had expected another ordinary morning, sipping his coffee and heading to work without a care in the world. Instead, he found himself staring at the legal documents in disbelief. At first, he thought there had been some mistake. Divorce? Without a conversation? Without a warning? It made no sense. He had always believed Celeste was the type of woman who would fight for their marriage, who would demand answers, who would beg for an explanation before making any drastic decisions. But he had underestimated her. He scrambled to reach her, to get her to talk, but Celeste had already moved on from caring about his justifications. Every attempt to speak to her was ignored. His calls went unanswered, his messages left unread. She had already checked out of the marriage, leaving him with nothing but the consequences of his own actions. News of the divorce spread quickly among their friends and family. No one understood what had gone wrong. From the outside, they had seemed like the perfect couple. Kieran found himself bombarded with questions. Why? What happened? But Celeste remained silent, offering no explanations. The mystery of her decision only made the situation worse for Kieran. The more he tried to deny his guilt, the more people speculated. If he had nothing to hide, why wouldn't Celeste give him a chance to explain? It wasn't long before whispers of infidelity started circulating. He could feel his reputation slipping, the image he had carefully built beginning to crumble. For the first time in his life, Kieran felt powerless. He had controlled so much for so long, always confident that he could fix any problem that arose. But this time, he had no control. Celeste had made sure of that. She had taken everything he thought he had, leaving him grasping at the remnants of a marriage that had already ended in her mind. And the worst part? He still had no idea how she had found out. Kieran's mind was in chaos. The divorce papers felt like a slap in the face, a brutal reminder that his life was unraveling before his eyes. He had spent years believing he was in control, carefully managing his marriage, career, and secret affairs without consequence. But now, Celeste had shattered that illusion. She hadn't screamed at him. She hadn't confronted him. She had simply walked away, without giving him a chance to talk his way out of it. For days, he tried to figure out how she had found out. He retraced his steps, going over every detail in his mind. He had been discreet, hadn't he? The affair had been carefully managed. Quick meetings, secret hotel rooms, and an untraceable messaging app. There had been no late-night confessions, no accidental messages left open on his phone. His mistress, Renata Vaughn, had been just as cautious. She had assured him that no one would ever find out. Yet somehow, Celeste had known. The realization gnawed at him. The divorce itself wasn't what terrified him. It was the fact that she had made the decision without hesitation. It meant she had undeniable proof. But what was it? Did she have photos? Witnesses? Had someone seen him? Kieran's panic grew as he considered the possibilities. If Celeste knew everything, then Renata was in trouble too. Unlike him, she had far more to lose. She wasn't just his mistress. She was his business associate, someone who worked closely with him in his real estate firm. If word got out, it wouldn't just ruin his marriage, it could destroy both of their careers. Frantic, he called Renata, his fingers trembling as he dialed. The moment she answered, he could hear the tension in her voice. She had already heard about the divorce, and she was just as shocked as he was. She demanded answers. How had Celeste found out? Had Kieran been careless? Did she know about their secret meetings? Kieran had no answers for her. All he knew was that Celeste had made up her mind, and there was nothing he could do to stop her. But Renata refused to accept that. She had worked too hard to build her reputation, to establish herself as a powerful woman in the industry. A scandal like this could destroy her credibility. She wasn't going to let that happen. She demanded that Kieran fix things, that he find a way to make Celeste back down. She wanted reassurance that their secret was still safe. But Kieran knew better. Celeste wasn't the type to bluff. If she was divorcing him without warning, it meant she had already made peace with the consequences. There would be no reconciliation, no drawn-out fights. She was done. Desperation set in as he realized just how little control he had left. The more he tried to reach Celeste, the more she shut him out. Her silence was louder than any accusation, more devastating than any confrontation. He could feel his life slipping through his fingers, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Then, as he sat alone in his office, staring blankly at the divorce papers, another thought crept into his mind, something even more terrifying than the divorce itself. What if Celeste had known for longer than he realized? What if she had been planning this all along, waiting for the right moment to strike? And worst of all, what if she wasn't just walking away, but setting him up for something far worse? Kieran couldn't shake the paranoia creeping through his mind. The more he thought about it, the more certain he became. Celeste's actions weren't impulsive. She had been planning this for a while, waiting for the right time to execute her decision. But what was her real endgame? His attempts to reach her were fruitless. Every call went unanswered, every message ignored. Even mutual friends refused to get involved. It was as if Celeste had erased him from her life overnight. But Kieran wasn't just concerned about his marriage anymore. He was worried about what she might do next. His mind raced through the possibilities. Had she hired a private investigator? Did she have evidence beyond the lipstick stain? Maybe she had something concrete: hotel records, surveillance footage, text messages. If she did, it wouldn't just be a personal disaster. It could ruin his career, his reputation, and, worst of all, expose Renata. Renata was growing restless. She had been careful her entire life, building a professional image that allowed her to move seamlessly through high society. This kind of scandal could cost her everything. She had expected Kieran to keep things under control, but now his desperation was making things worse. She demanded that he get ahead of the situation, force Celeste into a settlement, or manipulate the narrative before it spiraled out of control. But Kieran knew that wasn't possible. Celeste wasn't interested in negotiation. She had already removed herself from the game. Then, something happened that made his blood run cold. A former colleague reached out, someone Kieran hadn't spoken to in years. The man's message was brief, but the meaning was clear. Kieran's name was being whispered in the wrong circles. Someone had been asking questions about him, about his fidelity, his business deals, and his connections to Renata. It wasn't just a divorce anymore. Celeste was playing a bigger game. Kieran tried to stay ahead of it, reaching out to old contacts, trying to figure out what was happening behind the scenes. But the information was limited, and every time he thought he had a lead, It turned into another dead end. Then, Renata made a terrible mistake. She panicked. Instead of lying low, she tried to confront Celeste herself. She thought she could intimidate her, scare her into silence, but she underestimated her. Celeste didn't react. She didn't argue, didn't threaten. She simply smiled, a calm, knowing expression that sent a wave of fear through Renata. It was then that Renata realized something crucial. Celeste wasn't trying to expose them. She was waiting for them to destroy themselves. Renata returned to Kieran more furious than ever. She insisted they needed to take control of the situation, that Celeste had too much power. But Kieran knew the truth. Celeste had already won. The next day, a rumor started spreading through Kieran's business circles. It wasn't about the affair. It was something much worse. A former client had filed a complaint against him, alleging unethical business practices. Another followed, then another. Celeste had never needed to expose the affair. She had aimed for something far more damaging. She had gone after the foundation of his success, ensuring that when he fell, it wouldn't just be the loss of his marriage, it would be the loss of everything, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Kieran had spent years building his life on control over his business, his relationships, his secrets, but now that control was gone. Celeste had taken it from him without ever raising her voice, without ever making a scene. She had executed her plan with precision, striking at the core of his existence. His reputation was crumbling faster than he could contain the damage. The accusations of unethical business practices were spreading like wildfire. Clients were pulling out of deals, investors were distancing themselves, and his name was being whispered in conversations he wasn't privy to. Every attempt to stop the fallout only seemed to make it worse. Renata was unraveling. The once confident woman who had been so sure of herself was now paranoid and restless. She was certain Celeste was behind everything, but there was no proof, no direct connection. Celeste hadn't spoken out publicly, hadn't given any interviews, hadn't even acknowledged the chaos surrounding Kieran, and that was what made it even more terrifying. If she had come forward, Kieran could have countered the claims, played the victim, spun the narrative in his favor. But she didn't need to. She had let the weight of his own misdeeds crush him. Every person he had wronged, every corner he had cut, every shady deal he had made, Celeste had simply nudged them in the right direction. She hadn't exposed him. She had let him expose himself. Then came the final blow. One morning, Kieran woke up to a legal notice on his doorstep. It wasn't from Celeste. It was from the district attorney's office. A formal investigation had been opened into his financial dealings. Someone had provided them with records, detailed, incriminating documents that suggested fraud and embezzlement. He knew, without a doubt, that Celeste had been the one to hand them over. The realization left him hollow. This wasn't about revenge. It wasn't about making him suffer for the affair. Celeste had seen the kind of man he was, the kind of life he had built, and she had decided to dismantle it piece by piece. Renata panicked. She cut ties immediately, erasing every trace of their relationship. She released statements denying any personal involvement with Kieran, casting herself as a victim of his reckless behavior. The same woman who had once begged him to fix things was now ensuring that she wasn't dragged down with him. He was alone. His business was collapsing. His assets were being frozen. Lawyers were circling like vultures, and the media was having a field day. And Celeste, she was nowhere to be found. She had disappeared from the public eye, retreating into the quiet life she had always wanted. No scandals, no press conferences, no social media outbursts. She had left Kieran to burn in the ruins of his own making, without ever needing to set the fire herself. The divorce went through without resistance. Kieran didn't fight it. He didn't have the resources, the reputation, or the will. Celeste walked away clean, untouched by the wreckage. The last time he saw her was in a courtroom. She didn't look at him. didn't acknowledge him. She simply signed the final documents, stood up, and walked away. And in that moment, Kieran understood. She had never needed to destroy him. She had only needed to step aside and let him destroy himself.